Welcome to this Exam Prep Explainer. Today, we're going to master a highly specific, highly tested area of the Nutanix ecosystem. Our target for this session is exactly this: NCP-MCI 7.5 10.6 Microsegmentation Requirements and Limitations. Now, if you're an infrastructure admin gearing up for your certification, you already know the deal. The Nutanix Certified Professional Multi-Cloud Infrastructure exam doesn't just care if you know the high-level buzzwords, it actively tests your grasp of the hard boundaries, the specific configurations, and the exact constraints of the platform. We are going to cover this objective inside and out, so you don't just memorize a list of numbers, but actually understand the why behind them.
Here's our game plan for today. We'll start with why microsegmentation matters, walk through the core requirements, highlight the exam traps and edge cases you need to watch out for, and wrap up with the key facts you absolutely must memorize.
All right, let's jump into Section 1, why microsegmentation matters. Because, as we all know, securing the perimeter is really only the beginning.
Before we get completely bogged down in the technical limits, let's take a step back and contextualize why mastering this is so crucial in the real world. Think about a traditional network. If a threat breaches the perimeter firewall, it basically gets a free pass to move laterally, jumping from virtual machine to virtual machine. Microsegmentation shuts that down. It brings a zero-trust approach directly to the virtual network interface card of every single workload. It's all about granular, policy-driven security. And to deliver this, we use Flow Network Security, or FNS. This is Nutanix's native microsegmentation solution. It utilizes strict security policies to control VM communications. Now, you'll see the terms Flow and FNS tossed around interchangeably in the docs, but for your exam, just recognize FNS as the engine driving these security policies, and it's the primary focus of Objective 10.6.
Just to make sure we're all on the exact same page before we throw hardware minimums at you, let's quickly establish the baseline terminology for the two most critical components of your host. First up, the controller VM, or CVM. This is the virtual machine sitting on every single node that orchestrates all your critical data services and storage management. Second is the Acropolis Hypervisor, better known as AHV. That's the native Nutanix hypervisor that actually runs your guest VMs. Our microsegmentation rules heavily dictate how both of these components need to be configured.
Moving right along to Section 2, Core Requirements and Walkthrough. Let's look at the hard numbers behind the security.
Okay, when you deploy Flow Network Security, the system doesn't just magically make it happen. It demands specific resource allocations for things like deep packet inspection and policy enforcement. So, anchor this number in your brain right now: 40. 40 gigabytes is the absolute minimum memory your CVMs must have to support microsegmentation features in your Prism element. Why so high? Well, the CVM already handles intense data processing. When you flip the switch on Flow, you're suddenly adding complex network traffic evaluation and rule processing to its plate. If your CVMs are sized at, say, 32 gigabytes, FNS simply will not be supported. Keep that hard threshold in mind.
Right on the heels of that, here is your next magic number to burn into your memory: 9446. Specifically, TCP port 9446. You have got to ensure this essential TCP port remains open between your AHV hosts and your management VMs. If some rogue firewall rule accidentally blocks TCP 9446, your hypervisor hosts literally cannot send their connection tracking data back to the central management plane. And if that data can't get there, your network flows cannot be monitored and they definitely cannot be controlled.
So, how does this actually look in the wild? Let's say you're tasked with enabling FONS in a fresh environment. You'd need to step through this exact sequence. Step 1, verify you actually have an active Flow license. Nutanix is pretty nice about this and offers a 60-day trial if you haven't bought the license yet, but without one or the other, the whole feature is locked down. Step 2, verify all the CVMs in your Prism element cluster have that 40 gigabytes of memory we just harped on. And Step 3, make absolutely sure TCP port 9446 is wide open for that critical connection tracking.
Now, since we're talking so much about connection tracking, let's bring Prism Central, or PC, into the mix. While Prism Element is busy managing a single cluster, Prism Central is your big picture, multi-cluster management plane. And crucially for our purposes, PC is where your Flow network security policies are actually configured. It's also where all the neat network visualization tools live. Think of it as the centralized brain of your entire microsegmentation strategy. Let's look at a concrete example of how this traffic visualization is maintained behind the scenes. If an exam scenario asks about this process, remember this flow. First, if you're running a Prism Central scale-out instance, meaning you have multiple VMs making up your PC environment, every single one of those VMs must be powered on. not just the primary node, all of them. Second, as we know, the AHV hosts fire off their tracking data exclusively over TCP 9446. And finally, Prism Central grabs that data and visualizes it for you using a specific Kafka container.
Which brings us to Section 3, Exam Traps and Edge Cases. This is exactly where test takers tend to lose easy points.
The NCP-MCI exam absolutely loves testing your knowledge of strict limitations. A prime trap they'll use involves administrative cleanup. Here's what happens. When flow microsegmentation is enabled, a Kafka container named flow data is automatically created on the cluster hosting Prism Central. The trap is that an overzealous admin might see this container, not recognize the name, and delete it to free up some resources. If you delete that flow data container, you completely break flow visualization. Poof, gone. The exam might give you a troubleshooting scenario where visualization just mysteriously stopped working. Your first thought should always be, did someone accidentally delete that essential container?
Here's another classic trap that shows up all the time: node compatibility. FNS is fully supported on compute-only nodes in your cluster. No problem there. However, if an exam question introduces storage-only nodes into the architecture, red alarm bells should be ringing in your head. Flow network security is explicitly not supported on clusters that have storage-only nodes. The logic makes sense if you think about it. Storage-only nodes don't host the guest VMs that actually need these complex stateful network security policies. So the Nutanix architecture just flat out doesn't support mixing them with FNS deployments.
You also need to pay extremely close attention to the protocol and mobility limitations on this slide. First, let's talk protocols. Flow applies its strict policies exclusively to TCP, UDP, and ICMP traffic. That's it. If a question asks about applying flow policies to some obscure Layer 4 protocol, the answer is immediately not supported. Second, and this is a massive operational gotcha, you cannot perform cross-cluster live migrations for guest VMs that are bound by a flow security policy. Security policies are tightly wrapped into the context of their specific cluster deployment, so trying to live migrate a policy-bound VM to a completely different cluster, it's just not going to work.
All right, let's bring it home with Section 4, Key Facts to Memorize. Consider this your final review checklist.
We have covered a lot of exact specifications today, so let's do a rapid-fire rundown to really lock this into your brain before test day. I'd actually recommend grabbing a screenshot of this right now. Ready? CVMs need 40 gigabytes of RAM, minimum. AHV talks to Prism Central over TCP port 9446. You are limiting your policies strictly to TCP, UDP, and ICMP traffic. If you have storage-only nodes, FNS is a hard no. If a VM has a security policy attached, you cannot live migrate it to another cluster. Never, ever touch the flow data Kafka container. And finally, none of this matters without an active flow license or the 60-day trial.
So, now that you know the exact boundaries and constraints, how are you feeling about tackling Objective 10.6 on the real exam? Remember, mastering this platform isn't just about knowing what it can do, it's about intimately understanding exactly what it cannot do. Keep these constraints fresh in your mind, apply the logic we walked through today, and you are going to absolutely crush these infrastructure security questions. Good luck with your studying, and I hope this explainer brought some serious clarity to your NCP-MCI preparation.